All right, our next defense mechanism is regression. Regression is when we start to act more childlike when we're under stress because life made more sense to us when we were littler or smaller. So we see regression happen a lot in kids, right? We see it a lot when you have like a 3 or 4-year-old and they're potty trained. They don't use a pacifier anymore. They don't use a bottle anymore. They're being pretty independent. And then mom gets pregnant with baby number 2. And then she has the new baby and everyone's coming over to see the baby and mom's holding the baby all the time and the baby's getting all the attention. And this causes the 3 or 4-year-old to start feeling stress and anxiety, like how come I'm not important anymore? How come everyone wants to see the baby and not me? And that can cause them to fall into regression, where all of a sudden this 3 or 4-year-old who is very independent starts having accidents again, starts wanting to use a bottle again, starts wanting mom to, hold them like a baby again, right? So that's regression. And we can show regression at any point. So anytime we start acting in a much younger way than we should be, we usually kind of look at that as aggression because it's a way to, regression, it's a way to deal with stress. All right, a 40-year-old who's like out at the club acting like they're 20 may be showing regression because they're just got a divorce. They don't know how to handle that, so they regress back to a time where life made more sense to them. Identification is when we try to become like someone else to deal with anxiety. So we're having anxiety, we don't know what to do. So we say, well, who knows how to handle the situation? I'm going to start acting like them. So we're going to talk about identification more when we get to the next part of Freud's theory, but it has a lot to do with we identify with our parents, right? When we become parents, we've never been a parent before, we don't know what to do. We tend to think, well, what did my parents do? Right? I'm going to act like my mom did or like my dad did because that'll help me, guide me, so that I don't feel so much anxiety about not knowing what to do in this situation. Right, that whole what would Jesus do? WWJD, right? Although I did have a student once say, I always ask myself, what would Snoop Dogg do? Whenever you're doing that, what would so-and-so do? That's identification. We tend to mostly identify, though, with our parents. Compensation is when we make up for inferiorities in one area by becoming superior in another area. So if not being good at something causes you to feel anxiety, then you may try to compensate for that by becoming really good in something else. All right, so let's say everyone in your family is really good at basketball, and you feel like you should be good at basketball, but you really, really suck at basketball. You may then feel the need to compensate for that by becoming really good at another sport, or becoming really good at, chess or something, right? To kind of make up for that feeling of anxiety you have from not being as good at something else. Sublimation is when we channel socially unacceptable impulses into socially acceptable behavior. Freud said that this was a healthy defense mechanism, right? And this is really the job of the ego, right? The ego is taking those socially unacceptable impulses, the things that the id wants to do, and turning them into socially acceptable behavior, right? Saying, okay, we can't do exactly what the id wants, so we're going to channel it into something that society will accept and say this is okay to do. Right, so that is what sublimation is. It's pretty much the ego acting in a way that helps the id kind of get what they want, but in a way that's socially acceptable. When you watch that video, which of course is funny, so you made it watch a few times, so you're not laughing as much. If you go through and identify at least 4 different defense mechanisms that he or his dad was showing, then you have a pretty good understanding of the defense mechanisms, which is important because on the final exam I will give you an example of someone doing a behavior, and you're going to have to tell me which defense mechanism that is. All right. So we're going to get to now, sorry, I was going to skip that, Freud's stages of personality development. So it's a stage theory. It has 5 stages, and this is the most crazy part of Freud's theory, like super duper wacky, holy crap, the cocaine crazy. So I'm going to give you the whole thing in all of its crazy beautifulness. And I'm going to wipe away 98% of the craziness. And I'm going to give you that little tiny bit that's left that we can still say, yes, this still holds up over time. So remember, he never studied a kid, but it's all about kids. All right. So, and the stages all have like super great names, like the oral stage. So during the oral stage, which Freud said was the first day of life, during the first year of life, Freud said that the erogenous zone was the mouth. Now, erogenous zone you usually think of for sexy times. Like erogenous zones are like your neck and your genitals and things like that. But Freud talked about it with babies, which is just weird and gross. Anyways, what he really meant by this was that the mouth is what brings babies happiness, right? They like to suck on things. And, we calm children down when they're sad or upset with pacifiers or a bottle or a boob. That's what, sucking makes them happy. So the main thing that we need to have happen during the oral stage, according to Freud, is weaning, right? Getting the baby off of the boob or the bottle. Now, Freud believed that if this didn't go as it should, if we don't wean the baby well, or if we did something wrong, if the parents did something wrong at this stage, like Freud would say, if the child was denied the breast, then the kid can get stuck at this stage. So Freud called that fixation. We get fixated at this stage. And then for the rest of our life, we use our mouth to try and calm ourselves down. So anytime we have anxiety, if you go to your mouth for comfort, Freud would say it's because you are fixated in the oral stage. You have an oral fixation. So people that bite their nails, that, chew on the end of their pens or pencils, who smoke, Freud would say all of them were stuck in the oral stage. They never kind of got their needs met there, and so now they still have to go to their mouth as a way to calm their anxiety down. All right, fun times. Let's move on to the next super fun name of anal stage. So the anal stage is from 1 to 3 years old, and the main training here is potty training. Okay, so Freud said, so you need to learn to potty train at this age. And when you think about it, learning to pee and poop in a very specific area is kind of a weird thing we have to figure out as a baby, right? And around 2 to 3, where instead of just peeing and pooping wherever the hell you want in a diaper, you now have to hold it in, wait till you get to a specific location, and then let it out in that place, right? It's kind of a lot to do. So Freud said at this stage, this is what you need to learn how to do, and it's going to help you control your impulses. So if you potty train well, then great, everything goes okay. But Freud said there were 2 types of personalities, 2 types of babies that did a little bit different things here. He said there's this one type of kid who just would refuse to poop, right? They would just hold their poop in and be like, no, I'm not going to poop and you can't make me. And then you had the other type of kid who was just like, no, you can't tell me where to poop. I'm going to poop where I want. I'm going to poop over here. I'm going to poop over there. I'm going to poop on the dog. I'm going to poop in the fridge. I'm just going to poop wherever I want to poop. So Freud said that those 2 kids grow up to have, different types of personalities. So he called these personalities the expulsive and the retentive personalities. So the child that would just hold their poop in and say, I'm not going to poop, you can't make me, turns into what Freud called an anal retentive personality, which you may have heard that before, someone being called anal or anal retentive. It comes from Freudian theory. Right? And these are the people who need to have everything exactly in the right place and perfect, and this is when this is due, and I got to make sure this is here, and don't touch my stuff, and everything's got to be perfect all the time, and they just got to be in charge because I got to just hold it all. Then you have the other kid, right? The kid that would just poop wherever. So this person has a life that's, messy. Their, workspace at the office is just stuff all over it, and their car is all dirty. You open up the side door and a bunch of old Whataburger stuff falls out, and they can't keep a job, and they can't keep a relationship, and their life's just a mess. And what do we say about people like this? We say they don't have their what together? Their shit together. Where does that saying come from? Freudian theory. When we say someone doesn't have their shit together, it's literally like as children, they didn't have their literal shit together, and as adults, they don't have their figurative shit together. And Freud said that is someone with an anal expulsive personality. So if you know someone like this, have fun informing them that they have an anal expulsive personality, which is one of the greatest vocab words in psychology as far as I'm concerned. All right. So if that wasn't crazy enough for you, now we get to the next stage, which is by far the most controversial and super duper crazy, just nutburger part of the Freudian theory, which is the phallic stage. All right, so the phallic stage. Freud believed that between 3 and 6, we go through the phallic stage. And during this time, we start to develop sexual feelings for our opposite sex parent. Oh yes. So he believed that little boys fell in love with their mothers, and he called this the Oedipus complex because it's based off the story of Oedipus Rex, which was that this guy Oedipus went into an oracle, and the oracle said, "You're going to kill your father and marry your mother." And he's like, hell no, I'm not going to let that happen. So he ran out of town, and on his way out of town, he ran into these other people, and they got in a fight, and he killed some guy, and he went to the next town over, and then he married that guy's widow, but then it turned out that he'd actually been adopted, and the guy that he killed was his real father, and the guy he married was his mother, and it was all crazy, and people poked their eyeballs out, and it's a crazy story. So Freud was like, yes, that story, 100% true. Little boys want to kill their father and marry their mother. So he very much believed that when we were 3, that little boys would look at their mom and be like, yes, I am all about this. But then they would see their dad and they would be like, ugh, great, this guy is going to get in the way, isn't he? But then they would get scared of dad and they would say, uh-oh, dad's going to find out that I have a crush on mom. And so Freud believed that in the Oedipus complex, when little boys were in their Oedipus complex, that they also suffered from castration anxiety. And that little boys were scared that their dad was going to just come and just whack their balls off at any given time. So they were living in constant fear of their dad doing that, and they were in love with their mom, and oh my God, all this stuff's going on. And so in order to resolve the Oedipus complex, Freud said that what the little boy will do is he will say, okay, I can't have mom, but I want to have a mom-like person at some point in my life, so I'm going to start to be like dad. So this is when that defense mechanism of identification comes back in, and little boys start to identify with their father and say, okay, I'm going to act like dad so that when I grow up, I can be like dad and I can have a mom-like person. And that's how he resolved it, is through identification of the same-sex parent. Now, ladies, don't think that Freud left you out. Oh, no. So women, he said, suffer from the Electra complex. And that was just the reverse, where little girls were in love with their fathers and hated their mothers. Now, since little girls aren't going to have a castration anxiety because, you know, we don't have all that junk hanging out like the boys do, we had something even better as far as I'm concerned. And by better, I put that in quotes because it's all crazy. But Freud believed that us little girls would look at our naked father and we would see his penis and we would say, wow, look at the majesty of that thing hanging there and all of its weird wrinkly glory. And then we would look between our own 2 legs and be like, oh man, I don't have one of those. And then we would realize that we are not as good as men. And then we would experience penis envy. So little girls had penis envy, and wishing we had a penis, and knowing that we weren't as good as men due to the fact that we didn't have one of those things. Yep, fun times. Thanks, Freud. By the way, Freud also believed that lesbians come from women who never resolve their penis envy. That lesbians are just women trying to, like, put a penis into a female. Yeah, Freud was all kinds of weird. Anyway, so none of this is true, by the way. none of this holds up in court. All right, this is all kind of crazy. But, however, wipe away all the weird sexual stuff, which there is actually 0 evidence for. But what we do find is that at 3 years old, 3 to 4 years old, little boys and little girls are realizing that they are boys and girls. They are getting their gender identity kind of solidified. And what they do is they do identify with their same-sex parent at this age. Because they're saying, I'm a boy, dad's a boy, what's that mean? I'm going to do what daddy does because I want to know what it means to be a boy. Or I'm a girl, mommy's a girl, I'm going to act like mommy because I want to know the things that mommies do. All right, that does happen at this age. Yes, identification very much happens around 3 to 4 years of age. Does it happen because we're in love with our opposite sex parent? No. Also, something that we have to give a few props to Freud for is that a lot of people end up marrying people who have personalities that are very similar to their opposite sex parent. So there is something there. Now, does it have to do because we were in love with our opposite sex parent? No. It has to do with the fact that if you were raised with both parents and you're heterosexual, what you know about the opposite sex has been formed by your opposite sex parent. So when you go looking for a mate, you are drawn towards someone that has the same kind of personality as what you know, because we go toward what we know and what's comfortable for us. For better or for worse, that's what we do. So Freud was on the right track, kind of, sort of, but mostly no. All right, so he didn't write a lot about the last two stages, by the way, because they were kind of boring. So in the latent stage, sexual feelings get repressed. We start to learn how to play with people that are of the same sex as us. We learn our social skills. We're just kind of going to school and doing our thing. And then in the genital stage, we hit puberty. Sexual feelings are now going to be consciously expressed. We're not going to fall in love with our parents anymore. We're going to find a parent-like person who's not related to us, hopefully, and get married to them and have kids and probably screw them up too. So there you go, Freud's super crazy theory of personality development. If you want to know how he came up with this theory, I'll be happy to talk with you about that at a later date, because it is really screwed up too, but we don't really have time for that as of today.